Hello, and in today's video we are doing a rating your drafts video, right? We've done the main video and that's already scheduled for Friday, so watch out for that. I'm not going to lie, I've been changing my team 24/7 and it probably won't even look like what I said in the video because I've just got so many different ideas, but it will all be confirmed in due course once we get through that Game Week 1 review. But in today's video, I sent out a tweet on a few days ago, basically saying if you want any rating of drafts, drop your team down below and comment any kind of doubts you've got going into the deadline. And the deadline is ticking closer. It's currently Wednesday the 3rd of August. The deadline is at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow. I'm joking. I'm not going to get you scared. It's Friday the 5th of August. And at that time, I will, of course, be at Fantasy Football Fest. So I thought I'd do this now, have my team selection. It's just a lot of basically talk about Gaming 1 rather than my team, based on the fact that I'll literally be at Fantasy Football Fest changing my team last minute. So it'll probably look very different, but it'll be very interesting to hear what your guys' thoughts are on my kind of discussions from Gaming 1, my kind of thought process. So yeah, that is what we're going to go for on Friday. So get your notification bell turned on for that, 6:30. But today, I just thought I'd rate a few drafts. So thanks for all that commented and sent their teams in. We'll start off with this one, which I've just kind of put together on the transfers page. So as it stands, we've got this side, and honestly, I want to go by one by one, but as you can see, this team has got 0.5 in the bank. So the first video to rate or slate on this video is the first team, I should say, comes from on Twitter at Arshev. So capital A RSHEV, I should say. So that's MA 4 Cam F VSI 4KI. So I'm not quite sure how you say that, but thanks for your team. So yeah, as you see, 0.5 in the bank. So you could do something with that. Maybe that's you thinking that you might move Kane to Haaland Game Week 2, because if Haaland does well, he'll go up in price, as will Kane if he does well, and therefore you'll be able to make the move. But let's first of all talk about the goalkeeping situation. Now, Meslier and Clyson, I've seen a lot of people jump on Meslier, and I honestly don't understand it, because last season Leeds were very, very poor defensively. Now, I kind of get the argument with Meslier only based on his fixtures, because the fixtures for Leeds are actually very good. But Chelsea Game Week 3, even with those kind of decent fixtures, I just think Leeds, until they show us that they've got better defensively, I feel there's just so many better value picks in that 4.5 slot. You could go with a David Raya at Brentford. You could go with Robert Sanchez. And you can even go with, a 4 million goalie that might start. We don't quite know the situation around with Leicester. But now that Schmeichel's going off to Nice, you've got Danny Ward at 4 million who, okay, he might compete with the other goalie there. But if they don't bring in another goalkeeper, which maybe is unlikely, but you never know, you could have a 4 mil starter there. So you could even have Meslier and Danny Ward. But I just don't think Meslier is that solid. He's not going to get that many clean sheets. Yes, save points is a good argument, but I just feel that Leeds team, last season, Meslier was pretty poor. Only just got over the 100 kind of point barrier mark. And when you think about some of the other options, you look at someone like Sanchez scoring 126 points, I just think Brighton are so much better of a team defensively, and Leeds, let's kind of wait and see if their signings gel. So that would be my advice. I would change the goalie to a 4.5, to a Sanchez or a Raya, and then obviously you've got Danny Ward there, so you could have a 4.0 goalie from one of those teams like Brentford or Brighton, or you could go to Danny Ward, who might have a chance of playing. So then let's talk about the defence. Now, I like this defence. The only thing I will say is it feels like you need to go with Cancelo. Now, I'll address the Man City attack in a bit, but for me, Cancelo is very, very, very close to being essential this season for me. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, he was pretty poor at the end of last season. I get that, but ahead of a new season, when he's got so much attacking talent in front of him, they're going to deliver and, they're going to finish his crosses, because Cancelo actually finished on the same amount of assists as Robertson last season. People forget that. Because of the fact that Robertson ended last season so well, they forget that Cancelo kind of was also good in the first half of the season. So I think City's probably the best defence in the league. They've probably got the best defence in the league for clean sheets as well. So I think ultimately Cancelo is very tempting. But it's not easy to fit in Trent and Cancelo, especially if you're going to try and fit in an 8 million midfielder as MA4KM VSI4KI has here. So Arshev is trying to be a bit more flexible. I get that, but I'm not sure. But anyway, I will say with Lewis Dunk, that's a very good option. There aren't many good 4.5 million picks that are really get me excited. Tomiyasu's out injured. Ben White has not got enough goal threat. And Johnny, okay, he's not bad, but do we really trust the Wolves defence? And ultimately, I think with someone like Malacia from Manchester United, you could get some late season form, but for now, I'm not too convinced. So I think 4.5, Dunk is the best option because he's got goal threat. He's going to play every week. And actually, Brighton's fixtures are very good. So, with what I was saying about the 4.5, if you don't want to sell Dunk, you could always go to Raya instead of Sanchez so you don't have to double up. But I think, Dunk is very good, so keep him in there. And it seems that this is a 4-4-2. Well, actually, no, I say that, but you could play a 3-5-2 and have Dunk on the bench with Nico and Archer. So, yeah, maybe. But it all depends on fixtures, really. For Gameweek 1, though, I would imagine you would go with Dunk on the bench with Nico and Archer. But I just worry about kind of the lack of depth in that defence because, look, it is a good defence, but there are so many good value options in there, like your Rhys James, like your Cash. Trippier is good, but I just feel that Newcastle's fixtures are quite tricky to start the season. Now, you could obviously bench him when he's got Man City in Game Week 3, but then you've also got Neto up against Spurs. So you don't want too many benching headaches. But it's a decent team, I can't lie. It's a decent team. So Williams is your route to get that kind of 8 mil midfielder slot. But yeah, I think he's a decent option because he plays. Zinchenko, for me, I'm not too keen. I prefer Gabrielle at the same price because I just don't know how attacking Zinchenko is going to be. And will he be playing every single week? Well, at the minute, Tierney doesn't look like he's going to start. So I think Zinchenko will play left back, certainly against Palace. But I don't know. Because of the fact he'll play left back, I don't think he'll be as attacking as everyone is going to make out. And even if he did play in this kind of more midfield role, he'd probably be playing alongside one of Partey or Xhaka, and I just don't know if Zinchenko is going to get goals from that position. Playing in that position earlier on in his career, maybe he got a few goals, but, he wasn't playing for Man City back then. He was playing for weaker sides, so, he was playing in easier divisions. Of course, he's going to score more goals. I just don't know how attacking Zinchenko really is, whereas we know what we're going to get with Gabrielle. He's on set, very good at corners, and, look at Palace and Leicester, the first two opponents for Arsenal. They're very bad defensively from corners. So, I don't know. I think 5 million is a nice spot, though. You can look at Matty Cash, you can look at Trippier. And I also think people are really kind of undervaluing Walker at 5 million. Now, obviously, rotation is always a problem with Man City. But if City don't sign a fullback, then Walker might play. I just worry about his lack of goal threat with Kyle Walker. That's the only thing I'll say. So, I would be tempted to change Zinchenko to Gabrielle, but that's just personal preference. But another good option at 5 million for me is Matty Cash. Although Villa's fixtures do kind of have quite a short-term effect to start the season, they're not that good for long-term. You can certainly have him for the first 3 and then hop off on another juicy 5 mil defender. Because Cash last season was very attacking, and outside of the top 6 defenders, he was the highest defender in the game. So certainly got to be thinking about Cash. Trent Alexander-Arnold, good pick. For me, that's a very solid one. Essential in my eyes. And I know a lot of people will go with the argument of you can have Robertson for 0.5 cheaper, but Trent just offers something that Robertson doesn't for me. And it is a big debate, but I think every time Trent just comes out on top and is worth spending that 0.5, because I thought Trent would be 8 million this year, even 8.5, but to come in at 7.5, you think how good value he will be compared to some of those 8 mil midfielders that are a 0.5 more expensive. So for me, he is essential. Trippier, 5 million. I like him as an asset because, you know, he started last season really well with Newcastle, scored a couple of goals, got some clean sheets. Obviously, that injury did stop his run, so I don't know how kind of ready will he be to come back from that injury. But, you know, Nottingham Forest in the opening day is a nice one, so I can't really kind of say to not get Trippier because he's a good option, but just be wary of that Game Week 3 fixture against City, and then it's quite a tough Game Week 5 fixture as well. So it's not one that you really want for the long term, but for short term, Trippier could be okay. So yeah, the only real changes I would make so far are the goalkeeper and Zinchenko, but that's just personal choice. And remember, like, this is a 3-5-2 probably, so the only thing I will say is that it does leave the defence a little bit dry. I know you've got Lewis Dunk there, but on a game week where, say, Trippier and Dunk have both bad fixtures, you know, that's going to mean that you've not got many options. You can't necessarily, well, you might rely on Nico Williams, but it's not the best place to be in. Whereas if you have a back four or back five, you know, you can rotate. And the thing is, like, a lot of people have been talking about formations this season, whether you go for a 4-4-2, a 5-3-2, a 3-5-2. And for me, I don't think there's one right answer. I think it's just based on the kind of manager you want to be. Do you want to be a bit risky with a 5-3-2, but potentially have a better starting 11? Because you could go for a 5-3-2, have a really good defence and a decent attack, but then you only have kind of 3 midfielders and 2 4.5 mids, which is a bit risky, I admit, because it's hard to get out of. But this is a bit more balanced because usually midfield is where we see the value, but it's interesting here. I will say Neto is a bit of a Twitter hype, but I honestly think he is good enough to keep in there. I think he's got good fixtures. You can maybe bench him Game Week 3 against Spurs, but, you know, outside of that, he's probably the best player at his price. Obviously, the injury to Jimenez is not going to help, but I think Neto is going to get some goals. I think he is still threatening on his own. It's not going to be as flourishing in terms of points as it would have been if Jimenez would be there. Sancho, for me, I don't know. I think Sancho's going to possibly have a good season, but for me, it just feels too much of a risk when you can even save 0.1 million and get Rashford and then move maybe like a Trippier to a Rhys James or something like that. So I honestly feel like right now it's not worth it, but I could live to regret that. I think Sancho is certainly good enough. He wasn't quite at the races last season, but that was just the whole Manchester United team. So for me, if I'm going with anyone from United, I'm going for Rashford. But let's see how United do. Salah, I mean, the thing with the 7.5 is a bit of an awkward pricing, as is the 8.5 for Bowen. Now, I get Bowen was worth it because he was so good last season, but I don't know, it's just 7.5, it's like you've only got 0.5 away from those 8 mil mids. You might as well spend the extra 0.5. Like, you've got 0.5 in the bank, so you could go Sancho to a Mason Mount or a Saka, but I don't know, I just don't think that Sancho is going to do it this season. Salah is essential for me, good pick, not much more I need to say on that. Mahrez, now this is a bit of an interesting one. I said about that 8 million midfielder and how you could move to have 2 of them if you upgrade Sancho, but for me, Mahrez, a lot of people were hyping him up, and for me, he's still far down the pecking order in terms of 8 million mids. For me, there's still 3 that stand out in my mind, and they're Saka, Diaz, and Mason Mount. Now, Mason Mount obviously is not as attacking as we like him to be sometimes, and Chelsea in pre-season have been pretty poor, but for me, he's on corners, he still has an eye for goal, and he's pretty nailed. I mean, Chelsea still have the Tuchel Tombola, but for me, he's much better of a pick than Mahrez because of the minutes risks. Now, yes, City have sold Sterling. Yes, they've sold Jesus. But I just don't feel like Mahrez, until he actually starts starting games consistently, is safe enough at the start of a season. But we'll see. We could always move to another 8 mil, so like a Kulusevski. But again, will he be a rotation with Richarlison? So I think Saka as well is good value, and he's being overlooked because of Jesus at the same price. But if Saka is on penalties, he could be very good value. It's just, I don't know about Arsenal. Do we go all in on triple up? I don't know. It's hard to read Arsenal because they've got the best fixtures. It's tempting, but I don't know. I think for now the best 8 mil slot, especially because you've only got 2 Liverpool. I think it'd be better if you switch Mahrez to Diaz. That's just my personal opinion. And then Grealish. I think Grealish is too much of a risk, I'm afraid. I think as much as I would be tempted as a differential, I just think he doesn't inspire me too much. You know, I was thinking about him as a potential option. Like, he's a good price, but I just think he's a rotation risk with Mahrez. Like, those two are probably going to come off for each other, as we saw in the Community Shield. They like to kind of switch it up with Foden and Alvarez as well, who obviously came on and scored. So I just worry about having both those City midfielders. Maybe one of them might be okay and you kind of go with someone a bit more safe with the other. But Grealish doesn't exactly fill me with confidence right now. Until he starts banging in some more attacking returns, then maybe I'll change my mind. But for now, I think for 6.5 million, I prefer Rashford. And you can save 0.5 there, or you could even drop down to 6 million at Martinelli, who's got very good fixtures, and I think he's going to play because Smith Rowe hasn't really featured in pre-season. So that's where I would change it. And then Jesus, Kane, Archer. That is a good front three. I wouldn't change anything there. I mean, you could go Haaland if you think he's going to do well against West Ham, but for me, I would like to start the season with Harry Kane because he's a known quantity, and you've got the 0.5, so you can always switch to Haaland if the prices go up. But that's a very good front three. Jesus seems too much owned to not have really, because he's going to do well in that Arsenal team, and he's an unbelievable ownership right now. I think it's something like 73%, 72.6 right now. So yeah, that's a good team. I'm not going to lie. I'm just about going to rate it, but I will slate it unless you take out one of Mahrez or Grealish, because for me that's just too risky. And also Meslier, I don't like personally. Okay, but yeah, you could use that 0.5 however you like, really. Let's move on to the next team then. And the next team we've got to rate comes from Sam Script at FPL_scripted. Thanks for sending in your team. So I'm just going to update you as we kind of go here. I'm going to fill in his team on here. But whilst I do fill in his team, I'm just going to kind of talk through his comments, his doubts, what he's thinking. So obviously last team we gave a rate. Will we give a rate or a slate for this one from Sam Script? Well, he said, the draft that I love right now is this one. However, I do lack City options, but who would it be? That is obviously the big question. He doesn't want to risk rotation, and Haaland, he'd like to see how he does the first kind of couple of games before he enters his team. And it's an easy switch from Kane to Haaland if he wants him. Yeah, that's a good point. Because of the same price, obviously that, price rise, there could be a rise in price game week 2, but we just don't know. So let's find out. But Sanchez is in goal as a 4.5. I think that's a very solid option. With fixtures, I feel like Sanchez and Raya is pretty close, but for me, I think Raya's better fixtures. But the thing with Sanchez is he's going to play. Now Raya probably will play, but they have brought in Strachoka from Lazio, so I think that's very solid as an option, Sanchez. You've also got Gazzaniga as well. Personally, I would prefer Ward as a 4 mil, but I don't really have to complain too much because a 4 mil goalkeeper is kind of, don't overthink it too much. I've seen some people have a 4.5 as their second goalie. Now, I understand that because you're worried that your first goalkeeper could get injured or, in the warm-up or something, but very rarely does that happen unless loads of COVID cases are flying around. And I think that is starting to go on the decline. Obviously, COVID is still out there, but I don't think there'll be as much of that this season. Fingers crossed anyway. But yeah, I think for me, I would go for Danny Ward as a backup. Just as things stand, Leicester might play him. And then you've got a back four of Robertson, which is very interesting. You've gone without Trent Alexander-Arnold, which we'll get onto in a little bit. You've gone with Chilwell. So Chilwell over Rhys James is a big debate. Obviously, it's hard to know who's the better option. You've got Joao Cancelo in there as well. And then obviously Zinchenko. A lot of people going on Zinchenko, and I don't know, I feel like they might be underwhelmed. Maybe it's the transfer hype, maybe it's the kind of out of position potential, but I just don't know. He'll definitely start the season at left back, and I just don't know if he's going to be as attacking as, maybe even as attacking as Tierney when he's fit, but certainly as attacking as Gabrielle, and you can get a bit more security of starts with someone like Ben White, who should play there at some point in the season. If Tomiyasu's back fit, maybe he slots in Ben White ahead of Saliba. But for now, with Tomiyasu out, Ben White at right back, he's not got much attacking threat, admittedly. But if Tierney's fit, you just don't know about Zinchenko. So you could see Zinchenko move into midfield, but I just don't know where his points would come from, really. But no, I don't have to kind of take him out. I think he's a decent Zinchenko pick. And then you've also got Nico Williams, who, as I mentioned, is probably the best budget defender in the game. And we will actually be doing a video very soon about predicting the next Lord Lundstrom or Duke Dallas or, Lord Livramento. That will come in a future video, so watch out for that. And Nico Williams could be one of those guys. So yeah, very strong defence. I can't really complain with any of it. Chilwell over James is a good decision in kind of hindsight, because if Rhys James does get moved to right centre-back, then he won't be as attacking, and Alonso might leave, so that might free up Chilwell to play. And also Chilwell seems like he be less likely to put into a back three. So if they play a set back three, then maybe we could see Chilwell push a bit further forward. If they play a back four, then obviously maybe Chilwell be a bit more defensive. But I think the only worry I would say with Chilwell is the fact that, well, Rhys James is high-owned, so you're going against the grain. If Chilwell doesn't do anything and Rhys James explodes, then that will hurt your team. But also, Chilwell obviously was out with a long injury last season. Now, how he'll recover from that, I'm not quite sure. He only just played on the final day about a couple of minutes against Watford. So, I don't know. Is he going to be up to scratch? Let's see. But I would say it's a very, very tough decision between the two defenders from Chelsea. And then Robertson, picking him over Trent. For me, as I said before, Trent is just better in my opinion. But look, I'm willing to be proven wrong. Robertson is still very strong as an asset. And to get in an 8 million midfielder, maybe it's the way to go. But for me, I would change to Trent Alexander-Arnold. And Cancelo, can't disagree with that. So let's look at the midfield then. Another Jadon Sancho draft, which is very interesting. He's looking quite a popular asset ahead of this season. And also you've got Bukayo Saka in there as well. Now, an 8 million midfielder, I don't know how essential it is this season. There are some good options there, but you can always wildcard out and get an 8 million midfielder later down the line. Of course, you've got Mohamed Salah. That's a non-negotiable. He has to be in pretty much everyone's teams because he's just so essential. And then you've also got Leon Bailey, who a lot of people have been talking about in pre-season. He's done well in pre-season, to be fair to him, but for me, I'm not that convinced. For me, it's quite a hard price point to move from. If Bailey starts going bad, Villa's fixtures as well, they're pretty short term, so you're not going to have him for that long, surely, through the tough games. But also, if you want to move him on, who are you going to move him to? Unless you have a bit of money in the bank, you're probably going to not want to downgrade to a 4.5 if you've already got a 4.5 in Andreas. So it's a difficult one for me. I'm not too keen on Leon Bailey, but if he starts scoring some goals, maybe I'll be convinced. In the Premier League, obviously did get it in pre-season, but we can't necessarily read too much into that. And then your front three, you've got Harry Kane, good pick, reliable on penalties, and obviously is a bit more of a we know what we're going to get from him. And then you've got Jesus. It's a very popular front two, Harry Kane and Gabriel Jesus, and so it should be, with both those players looking really good for their respective clubs. And then you've got Greenwood as your backup striker. Sam Greenwood, obviously, last season did get quite a few minutes, considering he was 4.5. But for me, he's so far down the pecking order. And also, because he's the highest owned 4.5 striker, when people start seeing he doesn't play, they might sell him, and therefore you'll lose value. So for me, it's better to go with someone like Luke Plange at Crystal Palace, who's lesser owned. And he did actually score a hat-trick in pre-season. Or you could go for Cameron Archer, who might actually get some games under Steven Gerrard. So for me, that is a decent team. I have to comment on that pick of Sancho and just say, go for it. But if it was my team, I would prefer Rashford. Now, I can also see you've got 0.5 in the bank, just like the previous team. So you could move to Haaland in Game Week 2 if you need to. The only thing I would say is that, with that midfield, you are making your kind of midfield a bit lighter for the sake of Bailey and Andreas. I would prefer having a cheaper than Saka and then a more expensive than Bailey. because that way you're a bit more balanced in the midfield. It's a difficult one. I think the 0.5 could be used very, very well to Robson to Trent, or Chilwell to a Van Dijk perhaps. If you don't want to have Trent, you could go double up Liverpool. But I honestly feel that's a decent team, and I'm going to give it a rate. Just about though, but I would personally take out Bailey and Sancho, because for me they're just not quite tackling my fancy. But no, actually, I'm going to go beyond that. I'm going to say you have to bring in Trent. He's just essential in my view. You could even go triple Liverpool and forget Man City and go Cancelo to Trent. But yeah, that's all I would do. I wouldn't change that much other than that. Okay, thanks for that team from Sam Play. Oh, sorry, so not Sam Play, Sam Script. Right, moving on to the next team then. Let's have a little look. Oh, he's actually made a second draft. Okay. Well, fair enough. Let's have a little look at his second draft then. Sorry about this, people. I do want to move on to other teams, but I hadn't realised he'd done a second draft. So this is Sam Script at FPL_scripted, his second draft. So this is where he hasn't got an 8 million option. So he's got, instead of Gazaniga, he's got Raya. So he's got the rotating goalkeepers. Now, I will speak from experience when I say I do not like the rotating goalies. For me, I think they're just too much of a risk, and they often just backfire. Interestingly enough, he's got William Saliba in there. I would personally prefer White. I know that Saliba's probably going to start against Palace, but I think across the first 6 game weeks, I feel like if Tierney comes back, then you could see Ben White be in centre-back and Tierney at left-back. And if Tomiyasu comes back, then where is Saliba going to play? Because I'd imagine Ben White starts in centre-back ahead alongside Gabrielle. So, yes, Saliba's good, but I don't think he's necessarily as good as Ben White. And then you've also got Sancho in there again. Instead of Bailey, then you've got Neto, who I think is a better option than Bailey, but it's a kind of close one. And you've also gone for Haaland over Kane in this second draft. So that's interesting. Obviously, you've got options in this team. You've got options to play around with. It's a decent side, especially because you've gone Saka to Grealish and tripled up on City. But I worry about Jack Grealish as an option. I just don't know where points will come from. And actually, you've saved 1 million in this team. So that's interesting, because you can go from Robertson to Trent, as you have done, which does kind of talk about what we said earlier about just feel like Trent is more essential. So this is very interesting. I quite like this team, and I actually prefer it to your first draft. So for me, I would go for this one over your other one. But then I also caveat that by saying, take out Sanchez. For me, Raya is better as an option, and then put in a 4.0 like a Ward, and then use that extra 0.5 to maybe upgrade like a Sancho to an 8 million, and then you've still got 0.5 in the bank because you've currently got 0.5. So that was what I would do personally, and I also would go from Saliba to White. But outside of that, I think that's a very good team, and I think you've improved it from before. So thanks for sending in your second draft, but let's move on to someone else. He says he prefers his first. He said Grealish could be a rotation risk. Yeah, the thing is, Grealish is a bit of a punt, but he also could come really good. And Haaland has got a bit of an injury record, as you mentioned. But for me, I think Haaland still, it's so close between him and Kane. I'm going Kane, but feel free to do what you want. Okay, let's move on to the next team then. And that's from FPL Running Pharmacist. So at FPL_RunFarm. Thanks for putting in your team. So we'll just read out his comments as we go through. But in goal, he's got Edison, just like me. As it stands, I say just like me. This is my current team, but obviously it could change. He's also got his backup goalkeeper as Liss. I'm not quite sure I've ever heard of this guy, but Southampton. For me, if you're going to get a 4 mil Southampton goalie, it's surely going to be Willy Caballero. I mean, oh, actually, no, Willy Caballero is at... Yeah, no, he is at Southampton. I was thinking he was at Tottenham. Yeah, for me, I don't see why you wouldn't go Caballero if you're going for that. But you could also go Ward if you think he's going to play. So, yeah, I can't really change a 4 mil goalie. It's not that important. But Edison's a very good pick. I think he will be a very strong contender. 155 points last season. Was only bettered by 2 in the game last season. And that was, of course, Lloris and Alisson. But obviously, you want that Liverpool spot for a Diaz or a Robertson, and you probably want to leave your Spurs spots for a Son or Kane late down the line. So Ederson looks a really good pick, and he's got the best fixtures for clean sheets. So really, really like that pick. In defence, you've gone very nice, big at the back. So you've set out a 4-4-2 here. And I've got to say, I really like this team. There's very little that I have to complain about it. You've got Joao Cancelo, and you've also gone and got Rhys James. Now, Rhys James obviously is interesting. I don't know, will he play right centre-back? But ultimately, I still feel we have to see him on the same level as some of these attacking fullbacks like Cancelo, like Trent, like Robertson, because he's just so attacking. But will he be played at right wing-back or not? That is the question. And Chelsea in defence have looked a bit shaky in pre-season, but that might not necessarily play a massive factor. We just have to see how Chelsea start the season. You've also gone and got Alexander Arnold, which is a good decision for me. As I say, he is essential in my eyes. And then you partnered him with Perisic. Now, Perisic is a very interesting one. Before the game recently that Spurs played, I think they played against Roma, and Perisic also played. Now, I would have said Perisic was a bad pick. I'm starting to lean towards him a bit more now, which is a strange thing, really, because I know how much of a rotation station there will be in that Spurs team with the fullbacks, because they've signed Jed Spence, they've still got Emerson. Now, as it stands, Reguilon is still at the club, but I think he's going to leave, and they've also got Doherty. So I don't think it will be easy for Perisic owners. I think they're going to have to take a few hits. They're going to have to accept he's not going to play that many minutes, but when he does start and when he does go forward, he is so attacking, and that is very, very appealing for 5.5 million. So he could be a better option than Rhys James, but we don't quite know if Perisic will do it in the Premier League yet. I do think, though, that, with Spurs, their defence can be considered weaker than Chelsea, Liverpool and City. So it's just whether you think Spurs will be strong enough defensively. But if you look past that Chelsea fixture in Gameweek 2, they have got good fixtures, Spurs. So I don't think that's an awful pick. You've also gone for Nico Williams as well, which is a good call to save some budget. So you've interestingly gone with 2 Liverpool in this team. I was going to mention no Robertson, but you've also not got Diaz either. So should be interesting to see how people kind of go with that Liverpool triple up debate. But that's a good defence. I actually wouldn't change anything about the defence, but other than maybe try and find a way to sneak in like a Cash or a Robertson. But really, I can't really complain it. So this is the first team I've said where, the whole goalkeeping and the defence, I don't really think is worth changing. Let's move into the midfield, though. You've got Gabrielle Martinelli, who, yes, he's going to be prone to a bit of rotation. That's inevitable with the way that Arsenal have those attackers, Saka, Odegaard, Smith Rowe. But I think Martinelli was good in pre-season, getting a few assists, and Smith Rowe's been pretty behind in pre-season. So Martinelli, in my opinion, will start the season, and in my opinion, at 6 million, is just too good value to ignore. Yes, he could be moved along, and yes, you could argue that Grealish suffers with the same problem, but for me, Martinelli is better value because he's more likely to be more nailed than Grealish, and he's also got very, very good fixtures. Whereas with Jack Grealish, you just don't know if he's going to perform. Whereas Martinelli last season was his breakout season. But instead of Grealish in that midfield, you have gone with Sancho again. Now, I'm getting tired of putting Sancho in these teams, but fair enough. He could really go well, and I just worry about that fixture in Game Week 3 against Liverpool. But ultimately, at 7.5, he is that interesting price point. You only take 4.5 to get to an 8 million midfielder. So if he doesn't start working, you could always downgrade to a 6 million, like a Bruno Guimaraes, or a 6.5 even with Rashford. So I just think United, they're going to be interesting this season. They could do well, but I'm willing to kind of wait and see rather than bet that they're going to be great from the off. They have been good in pre-season, but in my opinion, I prefer Rashford over Sancho to save the 1 million. And then you've also gone with Neto as well. Now, Neto, I think, is a good shout. I don't think you can go too much wrong with that. And that is a kind of very strong midfield. So I don't really dislike it. I think the only one I would maybe think about is Sancho. And then you got a front two of Kane and Gabriel Jesus. And then your backup goalkeeper, your backup striker is Stansfield. Now, for me, it's just an easy decision. I would easily go from Stansfield to Cameron Archer because Stansfield's got no chance of playing. Archer might do, and he could be decent at that price. But that is a very strong team, I can't lie. And this is the first team I've kind of looked at and thought, oof, that's a very, very good attempt. So the only things I would change, Sancho to maybe it's difficult because there's not much value, in my opinion, in that kind of 6 million to 7 million bracket other than Martinelli and Neto. So who you would move Sancho to, I'm not too sure. But I think if you could find a way to get an 8 million midfielder here, it might be quite good. So you could even downgrade Sancho, downgrade Ederson. Now, I know what I said about Ederson, and I think it'd be nice to have 2 City going into the season, but it's not essential. Because if you want 2 City, then you could get only one move to go to Haaland and have him for triple up City against Bournemouth. But that's not really that essential. Let's say for now you went for a David Raya, save a bit of money, and then if you want 0.5 to play with, then you could put in an 8 million midfielder there. So you could put in a Mason Mount or a Kulusevski. If you think you're going to change Kane to Haaland, then you can have Kulusevski to cover Spurs and keep Spurs. But yeah, I honestly don't think you can go too wrong with that team. It's just I personally like to save 0.5 of the bank, but it's a decent team. Thanks for sending it in. Your current doubts, though, are James, whether he'll play in that kind of attacking spot. I think he's got a game against Udinese that he played, but I'm not quite sure where he played. Let me have a little Google search of that, people. Udinese, of course, funnily enough, is my team Watford's parent club. Or I say parent club, it's like their, the club that they do a lot of transfers with. Right, I wonder if we can find somewhere the positions. Bear with, people, whilst we just look up this Chelsea game. Okay. So yeah, if he did play right wing back, then fair enough. But I wasn't sure. So yeah, he was subbed off for Emerson on the 72nd minute. But is there a place we can see match report? Here we go. So the lineup. Let me just have a look. So you've got Ben Chilwell. Okay, so yeah, so Rhys James, obviously, interestingly enough, he didn't look like he played, does it? Did he actually play? Perhaps he didn't. Maybe it's just giving him a rest, but I didn't see him there in that lineup. But anyway, the point I'm saying is he could be moved on to anyone. Perisic as well could switch to Doherty, as you've said. That is an interesting one. And then Sancho is a bit of a punt. I agree, but personally, I would move Sancho down. I just don't think he's that good value, but we will see. Okay, let's move on to the next team then. And by the way, that was a rate. I really do like this team. Other than a couple of players, I think it's a very strong line of thought. The only thing I would say is maybe try and fit in 3 Liverpool, because you could even put Alisson ahead of Ederson and get that, because for me, I think triple Liverpool is just really much needed. The next team we've got is Thomas White at Thomas W 700287111. Thanks for sending in your draft. He said the only 2 players that could change at the minute. So he's got in goal Meslier, who we're going to have to go back to and talk about, but we've already said, in my opinion, I just don't really rate him as an option. But I get the logic behind it with save points. I just think after last season, how poor Leeds were, I don't think they're going to suddenly become a much better defence. So you've gone with Romero, interestingly, instead of Perisic. You've got Romero there, who, to be honest, is not going to have as much attacking threat, but it's a cheap way into the Tottenham defence, so I don't hate it. And also, he's more nailed than Perisic. You've got Trippier alongside. You've got Matty Cash in there as well. So 2 good 5 million options. You've also gone with Trent and Cancelo. So that is a nice defence. The only thing I would say about Romero is I just worry about his attacking return. So you could switch from Romero to a Gabrielle, or you could even go to a 4.5 like a Dallow or a Johnny. But at the minute, I'm not too convinced by Romero. But maybe that's just me. Like, for the same price, you could get Matt Doherty, who's much more attacking. It's just about how nailed on is Matt Doherty. But certainly, it's not too bad of a defence. I would just certainly change Meslier for me. Talking about the midfield now. So this is a 5-3-2 formation, interestingly enough. We were talking earlier about, is it worth going for a flexible squad, or should you just get the best players? Well, you've got Mo Salah in there. You've also got Kulusevski. Now, I was saying about Kulusevski with Richarlison. I think Kulusevski will start most games. Certainly he will Gameweek 1 because Richarlison's suspended. But I don't see why Richarlison would play on the right, because he's not used to that at Everton. He's played on the left of a front two with Calvert-Lewin. But Kulusevski was certainly too good for last season to not get minutes. I just don't know if he's the best 8 million midfielder, if I'm honest. I think Diaz, Mount and Saka are all better. But that's just my opinion. And I kind of get the logic because it gives some Spurs cover where we probably won't be able to afford Son Heung-min. You've also gone for Maddison. Now, this is a pick I really like. Now, the only thing I will say with Leicester is the fixtures. And that's the reason he's not in my team, basically. If Leicester had a really nice run of fixtures, he'd just be straight in there because he ended last season so strong. But Leicester's fixtures are quite tricky. They have Arsenal game week 2. They've got Chelsea, Manchester United in the first kind of 7. So for me, it's not one I would go for. But if you've got enough options that you can rotate, I mean, I say that you don't really want to bench Maddison because he's good enough to score in games you can't really predict. So I'm not too keen on Maddison. I would prefer a Mason Mount or a Diaz personally. And then you've got Kulusevski, and then you've got 2 4.5. So you've got Andreas Pereira at Fulham, who, as I say, is a good 4.5 option. And you've also got De Silva. Now, if I was to go for a 5-3-2, De Silva is the one that I would fill that second 4.5 spot. And I think he could be really underrated this season. If he takes that position of Christian Eriksen and starts getting regular minutes, he was very good for Brentford in the Championship. And I think he can make that step up. So, he might be really underrated as an option. So that's a nice midfield. The only thing I would change is Maddison and Kulusevski. But then in terms of the front line, you've gone Harry Kane, Gabriel Jesus, and then instead of Stansfield, you've gone with Greenwood. But as I said with Greenwood earlier, he might just drop in value, so watch out for that. And I just don't know how likely he is to kind of get ahead of Rodrigo or Bamford or their other guy that they've got quite young, Gelhardt. I just don't think it's going to be likely. So that's a good team. All the money is spent on that budget. The only changes, though, that I would make is Kulusevski, Maddison, and Romero, along with Meslier. But you could possibly go to a bit more of a nicer price point with a Martinelli. So if you did Maddison to Martinelli, that would give you some Arsenal coverage. I think 2 Arsenal's enough. I've seen people triple. I mean, I might triple, to be honest, but it feels nicer to have just double. And then you've got 2 million to play around with. So you can keep De Silva, because if you're going to play a 5-3-2, you might as well commit to it. So for me, at 8 million, Mason Mount is a much better value. And actually, it'll be probably difficult to fit in Robertson at this kind of price point. So maybe you go Luis Diaz. And then you've got 2 million still to play around with. So you can go Romero to a Robertson. That's actually really nice, because then you can do Robertson in and you can do Diaz to Mason Mount. I think that's really nice. I think that is really improve your team at the minute. And I'm yet to see anything about Meslier, but you could change to a Sanchez or a Raya. But that, my friends, is a very strong team, and I'm actually quite tempted by that team myself. With Martinelli in there and an 8 million midfielder, and to fit in an 8 million midfielder and Cancelo, Trent and Robbo is pretty difficult. So the only thing I would say, obviously, is having 2 4.5 mids is a bit risky, but it could come off. If you're one of those managers, though, that does want to have a bit of money in the bank, you could just feel like you don't need both Robertson and Cancelo, so you could take out Robertson and put in a 6 million, so you could put in a Rhys James, for instance, and then you could upgrade a De Silva to a Pedro Neto, and that means you don't have this dodgy formation, and that actually gives you a bit more flexibility to work with. So those are some options for you there, and obviously Rhys James can be anyone. It could be Diaz as well at the same price, but that's a good team. I'm going to rate that team for sure. The only thing I don't rate about it is possibly the formation and definitely the goalkeeper Meslier. Okay, let's move on to the next team. Yeah, he said Romero and Maddison is the only players and the rest is locked in. Well, yeah, that's interesting. But let's see. Moving on then. Let's have a look at another draft. The next one we've got is from Z at LZLMU. And his team has got Mendy in goal. So Edouard Mendy, a lot of people have been talking about him as an option. I don't know. I was very tempted at the start, but now I'm kind of got cold feet on him, I think, because the way Chelsea have been defensively in pre-season, you could get Edison for 0.5 more. You could go for Raya, who's got better fixtures than Mendy. I say better fixtures. It is that Game Week 2 fixture that's putting me off, but especially, the fact Liverpool face Chelsea in Game Week 8, I'm not too keen on Mendy for me, but I could be wrong. But he's a decent option. You've got Olsen alongside him. So yeah, not too much to change in the goalkeeping department as it stands. Then you've gone for a big at the back 5-3-2 formation, and I've got to say, this is the kind of team that does make me look quite silly for saying Threemium was dead, because it's very, very strong. I just worry about the lack of flexibility, but we'll get to that in a second. So instead of Joao Cancelo, so that is basically what you have to sacrifice. No Cancelo, and obviously no Robertson as well. That might be too much of a sacrifice, but instead of Cancelo, you've gone with Kyle Walker. Now, I was talking about him earlier. I just don't know how nailed he's going to be. I think they're not going to sign a fullback because Cucurella doesn't look like he's going to City. But I just don't know if Walker's really going to be a good enough FPL asset on his own, in his own right. Now, of course, he's going to probably get clean sheets. But are you going to be happy enough with 6 points every week when you can see Matty Cash getting attacking returns and he's the same price? Like, I'm not sure. So it'll be interesting to see. But for me, I would think Walker is a bit of a risky one as it stands. As well as Walker, you've also gone for another 5.0 midfield defender, and that's Zinchenko. Again, I'll reiterate what I said on Zinchenko. I just don't know if he's as attacking as we think he is going to be. Certainly at the start of the season. If if Tierney comes in eventually and is fit, then maybe Zinchenko pushes a bit further forward and we see some more attacking contributions. But I'm just not so sure. I mean, he got 1 assist on the final day, didn't he, against Aston Villa? But I just don't know with Zinchenko. Then you've got Diogo Dallow. Now, Dallow's very interesting. Manchester United, I'm not quite sure how to read them, but for me, I think Dallow's a nice option as long as you've got bench options to rotate, because you don't really want him for Game Week 3 against Liverpool, but you could always sell by then, to be fair. But for the first 2 game weeks, Dallow, very attacking, obviously good fullback, very good Portuguese player, and I think he's going to offer some good value, but I just worry about United's defence. Last season it was very leaky. Yes, those first 2 fixtures are nice on paper, but Brighton and Brentford are 2 very good teams, so I wouldn't count out some goals being conceded by Manchester United. And then once that's happened, the value's been lost. So I don't know. Dallow's an interesting one. I'm just not too keen on the 4.5 defenders in general. Like, I just don't think there's enough good options, but Dallow's an okay option for sure. And then in your midfield, you've gone for a 5-3-2. So you've got Neto, Salah, and Saka instead of Martinelli. And I think, obviously, come the end of the season, Saka over Martinelli will pay dividends, especially if Saka's on pens. He might be a bit more expensive, but Saka's going to play every single week. And he was their star man last season, so I can't really complain with it too much. And then your other midfielder you've got, along with Andreas, is Jacob Murphy, because you've clearly not got enough money to fit in a Bailey or a Neto. Well, you got Neto, but you basically got 2 4.5s. So, yeah, that's all right. I don't think Murphy's the best 4.5, though. I think I would prefer De Silva, in my opinion. And then you've got a front 2 of the big ones, Erling Haaland and Harry Kane. Now, I can't lie, that is juicy. That is very, very tempting. But the only thing I will say, as good as Freemium is in this team, if you downgraded Saka, for the sake of the start of the season, Martinelli could play, right? And then you went from, just hear me out, Haaland to Jesus. And then you took a little punt on KDB. right? You've only got 0.5 to make up there. So you could go from, I don't know, let's try and think who you could say there. For me, I would say it's probably Rhys James you would sacrifice. So you could go for a Matty Cash, right? And then you've got a very decent defence. Not amazing, but decent. You've got a premium goalie. You've got a threemium. And you've got Jesus. And for me, Gabriel Jesus' ownership is just so much. It's just not worth betting against. And the fixture's so good for him. So I feel like he's just going to do really well. But it is very nice to have that freemium of Haaland, Kane and Salah. So I think this is probably one of the most balanced threemium teams I've seen. But at the same time, I think it does mean you're not very flexible. So if I had to change anything, as it stands, I would probably say, I mean, Saka's a good option, but I don't know. It's a tricky one because it's nice to have Rhys James in there as you've got. But personally, I wouldn't have double Chelsea defence. I think that's too much of a risk at the moment. So you could go down to a 4.5. You could go down to a Raya. So I would change probably Mendy, Zinchenko, Walker, and that's probably about it. I would leave it the rest of that. I'd probably say Cash is a better option than Walker right now. But obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Walker. If he's declared, going to play, he might be worth the risk. Like, I've had him in plenty of my draft, so I might even start with him. So I can't really fault it too much. It's a decent team. The only thing is, though, the freemium, I still feel like it compromises too much because you're missing out on those attacking fullbacks like Cancelo and Robertson. I think you've got to have one of those two. So for that reason, I know it's harsh, but I'm going to have to slate it. I don't think that many threemiums are going to be balanced enough. I know it's difficult because you want to have those three, but in any given game week, you're only going to captain one, so it's a choice between two. You're going to get most of the points from your captaincies of these freemium players. So for me, I don't think it's worth having three of them. Two is plenty in my eyes. But I'm going to have to slate that one. Sorry, ZLZLMU. Let's move on to the next team we've got here on the tweet then. And the next one is going to be coming from... where is it? Let me have a look. Hang on, people. I can't seem to have found the tweet. Sorry, people. I've just clicked off it. Right. Where is it? Bear with, people. I mean, we actually, to be fair, we might be near the end of them. So we've got Sam Scripps team done. We've got FPL running pharmacist, Thomas White. Oh yeah, we've done them all. I think that's it. I think that's all the drafts covered. So if I have rated your draft in this video, smash a like on it. Comment your thoughts on my advice. Do you agree with my advice? Are you going to listen to me? And as it stands, that is my current team. Obviously, I'm in a bit of a dodgy position because I'm in that weird formation. But I could make some changes. I don't know if I will or not. It's just all down to, is it better to go 5-3-2 or is it better to go 4-4-2? But it's all just kind of very much down to you. Like, there isn't one right answer. It's about what kind of manager you want to play with, or what do you want to play with in terms of like what do you want to take risks about. But personally, I think maybe the 4-4-2 is the better shout. If I did do a 4-4-2, my team would be this ahead of the deadline. So it would be David Raya in the sticks, and then I've got Diaz instead of Gabrielle, so that saves a bit of money. And then instead of Podence, it could be Neto. It doesn't really matter. And then dinero, not money. No, we're not. I mean, we'd love money, but it's not really what we're trying to search for. And then instead of Neto, we've got so we've got a bit more balance in the team, because instead of having all of these premiums, we're going to take out James because we're just not sure. We're just not sure about Chelsea and that right centre back spot. We just don't know if he's going to necessarily always play there, but we will see, I suppose. So then Williams could play in there. So then that was my other option. Put Nico Williams in, and then have a bit more of a midfield and balance the midfield out a little bit more. So I can have Rashford, who I know I've said I've quite liked compared to Sancho. But, you know, to be fair, Rashford's Game Week 1 record against Brighton is one to look at. And he could score against Liverpool. He's done it in the past. So that is the other possible team that I could come out with. It's just whether these moves are worth it. I do quite like Ederson, James, Gabrielle. I like having all those premium defenders and goalkeepers, but we will see. But thanks for watching my rating my drafts video. I will see you in the next one. See you later.